Caresh was a 20-year plot hole, and Blizzard closed it. That's right. I mean, 20-year plot hole, he's probably talking about back when we first saw the Ethereals in Netherstorm back in BC. And ever since then, a lot of us fell in love with the Ethereals. Not only did they have a really cool, unique-looking model, I mean, they were badass-looking. We heard about this world called Caresh, this home planet that had been destroyed, and we weren't sure what the hell happened to it. We knew Void Lord Demancius had done it. What did it all mean? All these plot holes coming to fruition here in this expansion and the final patch of this expansion, which to me, honestly, has told the best story so far in this expansion. Is it the Metzen effect? Is the rest of Midnight going to be better than this even? Let's see what Belial has to say about how all of this lore is finally leading to a peak.
If you're out of the loop, you're confused, you don't feel you got the full picture, good news, this video is very much for you. So, after many years of lurking in the lore, the truth of Caresh has finally been revealed, and it's a moment that many of us have waited for a long time, since TBC.
Oh yeah.
But we kind of all have some hesitation, right? I mean, is this just another flash in the pan? Another Ny'alotha, another Emerald Dream? Will it live up to 2 decades of hype?
I'll be honest, the last patch scared me a little bit for this, because like I've always been, just like we've always wanted to go to Caresh, I've always wanted to learn more about the Arathi Empire. I always thought the Arathi Empire was such a badass thing, the original human kingdom. I want to get more lore out of that. All the ruins that have been left over the northern part of the Eastern Kingdoms and what that all meant. And then we got some lore, and basically it was just like, oh, the Arathi Empire, they were all bad people. They did bad things. They tortured people, all this stuff. And I was like, oh, man, this is not what I wanted. I wanted to hear about cool sword and shield tales, not about how sad the Arathi Empire was because they don't meet today's standards of good people. So I was a little bit worried. But so far, Caresh has been much better than the Arathi Empire lore we got, that's for sure.
That might be impossible, but I think it actually does a fairly good job. Ghost of Caresh brings insane quest chains with big lore books, audio dramas, audio logs, lots of stuff, a trove of information going into the deep past of Caresh and the doom of the Ethereals. And if you're thinking, well, that's just patch stuff, don't really know what it means for me and the rest of the game, it's very much a preview of what would happen to Azeroth if we fail in the next expansion.
Right.
So today, I'm bringing it all together. So if you're already facing off against Shadow Guard or preparing to blast off with Locust Walker, the good news is, I made this video for you. I also have a problem. Vercel's V0 and every no-code tool on Earth have empowered a new generation of vibe coders. I've kind of joined them. My editors have actually been making internal tools for our team that previously we'd need an engineer for. There's a problem. A dragon. And that dragon is backend, and my sponsor, Boot.dev, exists to help you slay that dragon.
Oh,
and I'm not even being cheesy. Boot.dev is built by a gamer for fellow gamers, and it fits my weaknesses, right? Coming from C# game dev, mostly in Unity, front-end stuff was kind of like fine and easy to me, honestly.
Okay.
But wiring up databases, dealing with auth, all of that was obscure wizardry. It just isn't really where I had learned. And that's why I swear by Boot.dev. Lane and the team have baked the fun of an RPG, so quests, XP, guild style, Discord, that really is an amazing place, all into a curriculum that's laser focused on you getting serious back-end chops. If you've heard of words like data structures, API, auth flows, algorithms, Docker, if you've heard of those and want to know how to use them and build them, well, yeah, this is actually how. Now, you will build and deploy a server client Pokedex, you'll remake asteroids in Pygame, you'll even tackle job search preparation. And that's the thing with Boot. They don't skip the important stuff.
Amazing.
So no
I'm
more
so glad they
hell,
don't.
no pricey bootcamp hustle bullshit, just a structured path that turns your energy to make shit into viable engineering talent.
Unbelievable.
And Boot itself keeps on adding features. You've got the searchable spell book and constant content drops like TypeScript, which is absolutely huge. Wow. And I also have a hack to save you some money. Boot.dev/Bellular.
What a good guy Bellular is. Use his code.
Gets you 25% off your first purchase.
Off.
And if you buy the yearly plan, well, 25% of a bigger number is a bigger number. That'll save you the most.
True.
And if you don't gel with it, don't worry. There's a no-risk 30-day money-back guarantee.
Fantastic. I don't even need to watch the rest of the video.
Let's kick off into the depths of time. I really mean that. Caresh is a World Soul, and being the World Soul saga, we learn a lot about him. Yes, him. But even bigger, the idea of each World Soul being aspected to a force continues, and right now we think this guy is a World Soul of the Light. More on that in the end, but it has huge consequences.
Have I missed that lore? Oh, he's a World Soul of the Light? That's what's believed? What the hell? Is that something that pops up in the raid? I must have missed that. Anyway, so very cool. Okay.
Especially for the Midnight expansion.
That is interesting.
Now, the Ethereals have their own creation myth. It's called the Facets of Caresh, and it describes their planet evolving in 5 stages. First, Caresh the Merciless created a barren, harsh world, but he felt like something was missing. So, Caresh the Untamed created plants and animals, but still he felt alone. So, Caresh the Innovative created people. They sang and painted and made magic, and he loved it. Then, those people got too big for their boots. Their cities expanded and destroyed the wilds. They threatened to overwhelm their own world's creation with their creation. So, Caresh the Austere happened, who gave his people the final gift. That is, the gift of death, transformation, and oath. The first and last here in the story are fairly straightforward. A death means that their life has meaning, at least in their own view, and the oath is what governs Careshi society. We'll deep dive into that in a second.
Right, we saw a lot about the oath during the questline and how they will not break their oath. Even when the king made a wrong turn, the oath remained steady and they continued to follow him, which is kind of ridiculous. But that's an interesting one too about the death, right? Death coming up here, and that the death was a gift. Mortality was a gift from Caresh. That's what the Careshi believe. Interesting.
But transformation is a little harder to pinpoint, but we know that they survived the void by transforming into the Ethereals and the Brokers.
Yeah.
Finally then, there was Caresh the Silent, when all things die, even world souls. That was the future in their creation myth. Perhaps makes you think of the heat death of the universe or something along those lines. But of course, if you go to Caresh today, you very much find that he has been silent for a long time. Okay, that's the world soul setup. With that done, let's check out what's actually happening on his surface. It's hard to build a confident timeline, but we have some fragments. A Black Empire artifact from the Mog-Osh bounty is dated to 150,000 years ago, so we know that the old gods were on Azeroth at least that far back. Well, we actually need to go even further back to figure out Caresh.
Caresh is older?
I mean hundreds of thousands of years.
Damn.
We know it was a desert planet baked by 2 suns, Meter...
Star Wars. This is that. I mean, we're on Tatooine. That's what this is.
And Demeter. And before the world fell, the Careshi were the dominant race on the planet, but they were not alone. Now, we actually have no idea what they looked like, but this Doom of Caresh art gives us somewhat of an idea. They were an incredibly magical people. They harnessed the arcane of their world to create an advanced civilization. The High Priest Salhadaar was at the top of this civilization. Below him were the Priests of Caresh. And these guys, the oracles, are what is left of those priests.
Yeah.
Now, their role was to commune with the world soul. So it was a more direct relationship than we had on Azeroth.
And by the way, the high priest, who is now the king, like this guy, they didn't have a kingship back then. Like, there was no single ruler or leader. It was more like a council that used to meet. All the priests used to meet. Yes, he would lead the meeting, but they would make decisions together. And everybody in society, in Careshi society, had a role. So you had like the engineers, you had the religious people, you had, and they all played a role in advancing their society. Technology was a big thing for them. That's why they knew how to make the Ecodomes when it finally came time to make them. But that was like always their thing, was like advancing technology, becoming more intellectual. They were very much into studying and reading and all that stuff. And then as things started to fall apart, with Demancius bearing down on them and they're sitting inside these Ecodomes, the priest took a leadership position. He put himself into kinghood, essentially. And we kind of found out now why he did that. Well, you know, he was with Demancius at the very end.
Were the priests of Caresh. And these guys, the oracles, are what is left of those priests. Now, their role was to commune with the world soul. So it was a more direct relationship than we had on Azeroth. But honestly, I do think that's kind of suspect in a way, because it seems they couldn't really hear his warnings about, you know...
Azeroth shamans, like, equal to Careshi high priests. Shamans are more into nature. The priests were not necessarily nature lovers, as much as they were, like, studiers of the arcane and power and stuff like that.
The void coming. Now into this picture steps this guy. Locust Walker. Of course, we know him as Locust Walker now. He would have had a different name back then. Now, he was a minor noble and a technomancer.
Shamans are elemental. True.
Really with little hard authority. And it was his job to discover ways to transform other power sources into arcane, which of course was the type of power that the Caresh used in their society.
Yes.
And he was particularly interested in void research. He had even found artifacts that were ancient even to their society, and these were called the Reshi Wraps.
Yeah.
They could transfer massive amounts of energy, and this discovery earned him quite some prestige amongst his people, which will become relevant later. Now, Caresh had many cities.
And by the way, it earned him prestige amongst his people, but it also earned him a nickname that wasn't so nice. He was known as the Void Whisperer, and even the Careshi themselves didn't really like the Void. Right? They understood that it was a force to be feared somewhat, and so all this dabbling in the void from Locust Walker did lead him to have kind of a suspicious and a weird reputation amongst the people, even though he gave them these Reshi Wraps, which eventually saved their lives.
And a few of them are named. We've got Gestalt, Gervasha, Tingarla, and Manusa. Now that last city, Manusa, that was Locust Walker's home, and it was ruled by his close friend, Kaivessa. Yes, like our current Delve
Nexus
adversary
Princess.
Kaivessa, who of course was a boss in the first raid of this expansion. Now, the final city, Tazavesh, of course, would soon be the only one to survive what was coming to this world. But as of now in the story, the fall hasn't happened, but we're getting there. So, through his study, the Locust Walker, it was his title, began to pick up on something. A song. And all of his research went in discovering the source of this song. And then, with a sickening realization, he discovered the song was actually his planet trying to warn him about something. So, he gathered his research and he brought it to the highest council in Manusa. And on that council were Salhadaar himself, a gaggle of oracle priests, and his friend Kaivessa. Now, Locust Walker told them that something was coming for Caresh. Nobody listened. In fact, it was all a setup, because even Kaivessa had turned on him. What actually happened? Well, the High Priest said his words were heresy, and that this would be his final warning. Any more research into the World Soul, and there would be consequences.
Right.
Locust Walker kind of crashed out of this meeting in despair. His partner...
The meeting was fake. Yeah, maybe I'm spoiling this. Maybe Bellular is getting there. But turns out the priests had also heard the whispers. But they had to put on a public display basically telling him quit dabbling in the void shit because it's scaring everybody. So they didn't want society to know that he was going to continue to do so and that they were going to greenlight it. So they held this public council in front of everybody where they basically told him, stop doing void shit. Nobody likes that around here. And they met with him after and told him, actually, we believe you.
A spell dancer named Chryson suggested he move back to Tazavesh with her and just take a break from it all. But
Sam pre-watches so he knows what's coming. No. This is lore from the audio release that Blizzard put out on their YouTube channel, which I listened to in its entirety, and it was actually really good.
Ends. That's because while walking alone one night, he was bagged, kidnapped, and dragged into a dark room.
Yep.
Maybe
this is where they revealed to him
agents trying to take him out quietly. But when the bag was removed,
that the whole meeting was a farce.
He was surprised. He found himself in a small room filled with people, and those people were some of the greatest minds on the planet. His kidnapper was a woman named Nari. Yes, Venari, as we now know her. And in front of him was Nari's boss, High Priest Salhadaar. He then explains that everyone in the room had also heard the Radiant Song, this weird song that was coming from the planet. And actually, it was that the priesthood had a stranglehold on their society, and Salhadaar couldn't risk conflict. It seemed that for the priesthood, their connection with the World Soul basically was their entire power base. Yeah. So if other people...
This whole scene where Xal'atath gets the priest here to hear the voice of Caresh once again is very suspicious to me. Even the line that Xal'atath drops after, I can't remember her exact words, but it was something like, who would have thought that, hearing the voice again would give so much hope and, get them to work with us. Like she was like, oh, all I did was, fake the voice and, to get them to work with us. It was interesting. She couldn't hear shit until that whole spell thing happened from Xal'atath. I don't really think that she actually heard the voice. I think Xal'atath's faked the whole thing, and actually, Caresh is kind of dead. They still can't hear the voice. Yeah, that was all. That was all it took. Yeah, yeah, that's what she said. She goes, "Oh, that was all it took. Just hearing a peep again from the world soul."
People are starting to hear the world soul.
Interesting.
They feel threatened and they hit back. So to deal with this problem, they formed a secret society named the Revel, hoping that they would be able to find a way to save their people. So as it turned out, the whole setup at the Menusa Council was actually a double bluff. And yeah, it was to form this group, the Revel, and get Locust Walker into it.
Right.
But not all in the Revel were happy about Locust Walker being there. That's because his use of the Void worried some people.
Yeah.
But it was also clear to Salhadaar that this guy really knew shit, and he was going to be able to save the planet. So his new job was to walk between paths, to not listen to detractors, and to not fall to politics. His job was to find a way through. So Salhadaar gave him a new oath and gave him the title Locust Walker.
Boom. There it is.
One day, the sun went down at the wrong time, and everything turned purple. The sky was full of devouring clouds, and before their very eyes, the Void consumed the Careshi's two sons. Demencius had came. And at first there was panic. The priesthood told people to pray harder, which obviously didn't really work. Nothing changed. The Void didn't attack, but it also didn't go away. It was just there. With no sun, and only silence, Locust Walker was tasked with figuring out a way to save the Careshi. He worked tirelessly, going a little bit loopy, but he eventually worked out a solution. It wasn't perfect, and when he revealed it to the Revel, it was so controversial it nearly split the group. And that's because his solution would not save the planet, but it would save the people.
The Ecodomes. That's right. The Ecodomes were the big way to save the people. Basically, he came to them and he said, there's nothing I can do to stop this force known as Demencius. He's coming. He's going to destroy our planet, and if we're still on it without protection, we're going to die with it. So he created these Ecodomes with all the arcane knowledge that the society had built up over the years. They were very knowledgeable in the arcane, so this was how he did it. And he was able to kind of use his Reshi wraps and things later on. He'll get into this. But essentially, these Ecodomes were just their saving grace. It was the only way for them to survive while their planet was being destroyed around them.
Plan was to build huge arcane
almost like
shields
self-imprisonment.
around their cities, ones that would use the Reshi wraps to harness the power of the Void to maintain their integrity. This was controversial. They doubted it would work, but Salhadaar and Nari put their faith in Locust Walker, and bending...
Little did they know, these shields would also change them forever. Ooh, prelude. What's going to happen? I don't know.
Their whole society toward that effort had the shields up in just months. Fast, but even then, it was barely in time. The energy in their sky had gathered enough of the Void was there, and so it finally descended on the planet. The shields held, the Careshi were safe, but they were now prisoners in their own cities, and what's worse is that the timing seemed all too perfect. It almost seemed as if someone was benefiting from it all. Now, we believed it was the power of the Twisting Nether that destroyed the Careshi's bodies, but as it turns out, it was actually their long exposure to the shields that were meant to protect them, where over time the arcane burned their flesh and tore their muscles, and so they began to wrap themselves in bandages. Magical arcane bandages.
I actually thought this was really cool. Like when I was listening to it and I was like, oh, that's how. So they started to fall apart, and he's got these Reshi wraps that they essentially started wrapping themselves up in to keep their bodies together. Okay, and we knew like this was what happened. We knew the bandages were holding their arcane forms together, and this wasn't their original form. But we always thought it was the Twisting Nether that caused this. Turns out it was the very thing that was protecting them. I thought that was actually really good writing. Something like we've seen points in WoW where like, oh, that's a really cool reveal from Blizzard. They actually did that really well. It was really well thought out. And I feel like we haven't in a while. And this story about the Ethereals is the first time in a long time that I felt like, damn, this lore really is better than what I expected. And that could be the Metzen effect. Could be that he's returned, and this... I've been saying it. I don't think this patch was supposed to be the final patch of the War Within. I think it was supposed to be Rootlands, something like that. And this was the audible that Chris Metzen called, and essentially this patch has become a pre-patch for Midnight. And I think that's why it feels so different from everything else we've gotten in this expansion so far.
to try and heal those wounds. But eventually they moved on from just wounds
Thanks,
to
Metzen,
covering
yeah.
their entire, now dissolving bodies in these wraps. Finally, Locust Walker pulled back the wraps of his lover.
He just comments
and
on
to
that.
find
Cool.
nothing but energy left within. That is to say that she had totally transformed. In fact, their whole society had, because they were now the Ethereals.
Right.
Turns out
You'd think that that would hurt and they would figure it out before they turned to energy. Well, they didn't turn to energy like all of a sudden. The way it is described is they started to slowly see cracks in their skin, right? And then they would wrap up the crack, and then they'd get more and more. And sooner than eventually they realized once they unwrapped them, because they've been wrapping themselves up. Once I think he describes his lover, right, that he noticed a light coming through the bandages, and once he moved it, he realized that her skin and muscle had completely disappeared. It was no longer just a crack, but her entire form was gone, and only thing underneath it now was just arcane energy. So it wasn't described as a painful process. They did describe people as feeling like sick. I don't know if they described it as nauseous, but they did describe like a sickness overwhelming them as the process was occurring, but no pain. People weren't writhing in pain. It was just like they were feeling like nauseous and sick all the time from it.
it was Locust Walker who transformed his people. But there is a question. Did Locust Walker save them with this whole plan, or did he doom them to a fate worse than death?
Yes, and was their fate to turn into these ethereal, arcane energy beings? Was that all part of his plan that he had made with Demancius? That's the other question that came up with the Caresh. They started to think, well, this guy's done this to us. Was this all part of the plan? That he wanted to change us into these beings? And this was something that the Void Lord himself wanted. So that was where these questions started to come in. Like, oh, he went from being, you live long enough for the hero to see themselves become the villain. That whole storyline, that's basically what happened with Locust Walker. He was hailed as being the hero of his people when these Ecodomes actually held back Demancius from destroying them. But then slowly over time, he was cursed turned into a villain because the people felt, well, these domes have actually now sealed our fate. They have cursed us. We'll no longer be the people that we once were because of them. And it's all Locust Walker's fault.
Okay, we've set up Locust Walker, but then there's King Salhadaar. Salhadaar gave the Locust Walker his name and purpose, so it's strange that Salhadaar is going to be a boss in the 11.2 raid.
Yeah.
A lot of us may kill him next week. There's a mystery here, and we all kind of know this. Locust Walker and Chrisen were walking in the markets of Tazavesh when Salhadaar appeared, pointed to Locust Walker, and revealed the Revel's secret plot. But he left himself out. He told the Ethereals that it was Locust Walker's plan that doomed them. So it does appear Locust Walker was betrayed. He said that the shields were worse than death. And then he dropped the shields around the city. He let the void flood in. Locust Walker barely escaped, and he began his exile. Yeah. But I'm going to stick with Salhadaar.
All the cities except Tazavesh, which is why it is the only one remaining. All the cities had the same shield that Tazavesh has around it, and they would have survived. But the priest dropped them. Why? Because he made himself king, and he had done so with Demancius as his partner.
For a second more, we thought that he was on a quest for revenge against Demancius, but it's actually been revealed that he was working for the Void, and that his quest was actually a cover for regathering the shattered fragments of Demancius. So the question then is, when was Salhadaar corrupted by the Void?
Yeah, when did this happen?
Well, in the lore book, From Vengeance to Void, we learned that Salhadaar was, quote, the king of the hunt, whose vengeance against Demancius was so great it frightened us.
Oh, wow. So we got a guy who's hunting down an evil being, and then eventually, while he's, his anger and everything and trying to catch this being leads him to somewhat join the being. Oh, I wonder where we've heard that one before. You ever hear of this prince? He wasn't a king like Salhadaar. He was a prince, and maybe his quest and vengeance ended up leading him to kind of join these forces. Maybe you heard of a lich before. I don't know.
But as we continue reading, we realize that was all a front. That, quote, he was not merely an agent of the Void, but the one who led so many to its clutches. How could this same warrior who hunted the all-devouring be the one who founded the Shadow Guard in secret? So it's clear then that Salhadaar was running a deep game on his own people. But how deep does it go? Because the writer speculated that, and I quote, Salhadaar must have fallen to the void long before the All-Devouring arrived. Long before. So this whole drama goes back to him. It goes back to him choosing Locust Walker, the one minor noble with a notable interest in the void. He then brought the Revel together, put up the shields, created the Ethereal.
Right.
It was all in service of the void. Because if you think about it, the timing of some events in the story is just too perfect, that the void only came after the shields, right? The timing was just too convenient, that the Ethereals were created and that Salhadaar and Mencius ended up with, funnily enough, a whole race of void-addled Ethereal servants. If Salhadaar was already a servant of Mencius, then this whole thing was his plan, to basically turn his people into the ultimate slaves.
Yep.
And that means he's the ultimate villain of the Caresh story. But he is...
And somehow these Oathsworn are still following him. It's absolutely ridiculous. I don't like that part of the story. I'm like, Jesus, really? Like, you're that single-minded that, okay, you made an oath, which I guess goes down to their very being. Like, they've always been very strong on their oaths. Like, we just heard the background story of Caresh and everything else, and how their final gift is their oath and their mortality. Okay, fine. But seriously, you're gonna follow this king after you state, they stated themselves, like, we know you betrayed us. How dare you? You follow the Lord Demancius. And you sided with him. And then the king's response was, it wasn't just me who sided with him. You made an oath to me, which means you have now sided with him. And then they agree with him and follow him. And it's absolutely ridiculous. I'm like, Jesus Christ, have a soul. Or maybe they don't have a soul anymore because they're arcane. I have no idea.
Actually not.
Weird. Yeah, zealot cult. Yeah.
What happened next is yet to be revealed, but we know what remained of the Revel used the Rishi ribbons to blow up Caresh in Mencius' face, which shattered him. And that's why Salhadaar spent a very long time indeed trying to bring Mencius back together.
Right.
Now, Salhadaar brought...
And evidently, this whole plan with the Reshi Wraps and the blowing up of Mencius was with Xal'atath included. She was part of the plan to destroy him the first time around, because she says our plan would have worked if blah-de-blah, and I forgot what the reason was. That we didn't follow through, we didn't finish, whatever it was. So this is her second time trying to destroy the All-Devourer. Interesting.
Many of his people into the Twisting Nether, and then of course Nari traveled with many others toward the Shadowlands. And then we cut to hundreds of thousands of years later.
By the way, that's why Locust Walker knew who Xal'atath was. You remember long ago when he was talking with Illyria and he was like, Harbinger, that's what she calls herself now? He knew her. He knew her before we knew her. And that's because they had come up with a plan to destroy the Void Lord, Demancius.
Later, and today, where it is finally time for them to return. But there are still major mysteries to unfold here, and that's going to be where you come in. Playing through Ghosts of Caresh will fill in many details, like how Xal'atath fits into all of this, because much of this account comes from Locust Walker himself, and for some reason, he doesn't want us to know her role in things. Now, there are other ethereal factions unaccounted for. For an example, Shadreen. She is the Ethereal that's been following us for years and years and years, even sneaking that little void coin into our adventure journal at the start of Dragonflight. But another 11.2 book tells us that she's not working for Salhadaar, not working for Xal'atath, and not working for Locust Walker.
She's her own
that
faction.
Could be a whole other plot thread. In fact, Locust Walker was actually annoyed that she wasn't coming back to try and save their planet. So something's going on with Shadreen.
Interesting.
Then finally, there is of course Caresh. In a story that's about to pitch over into a conflict about light and void in the Midnight expansion, I think it's no coincidence that the final chapter of 11.2's campaign is named The Light of Caresh. That the desert planet, baked by two suns and now fallen to the void, was once a world soul of the light and may still survive as one, is a fairly neat thing. Again, light, void, cycles, sides of a coin, Naru. It all starts to fit in with how we've seen WoW's lore develop.
Sure.
But that brings us to the end of Karesh's deep, deep lore. But if you want to know Xal'atath's side of this story, check out this video next.
Yeah, great story. I think this story it has gone so much deeper and is so much more, such a more, I don't know, better told, more well told story than anything we've gotten in recent WoW history. And that's why I have so much more confident now and so much more hype that Midnight is actually going to be good. Because this story has been so well told now, so interesting, so many little nuances to it, and actually better than I expected the Caresh lore to be. Nice video from Bellular.